Games Workshop are literally stealing ideas out of my head. Just last month, I made a video about my Inquisition-themed campaign, and look at this. Coincidence? I think not. And Lockie, these products have a lead time of like 2 years. How is this possible? Shh, they're always watching. So here I stand in the middle of the Imperial Palace, about to dive into another round of hobby insanity. Strap in, folks, this one is a wild one. This is just spooky. Last month, when I converted Skaven Tide into 40k, Games Workshop then released the perfect follow-up for the next chapter in my insane narrative homebrew campaign. Games Workshop, what have you done?
In the last video on this project, I went off the deep end, converting a crazy force of Skaven to fit the Warhammer 40k universe. These Skaven are a part of the Cult of the Fang, a crazy group of mutant abhumans who survived the siege of Terra in the Horus Heresy and are now scratching a living from rocks in the outer ruins of the Imperial Palace. They are the first of several cult factions for an upcoming homebrew campaign themed around the newly formed Inquisition cleansing the ruins of Terra, as humankind rebuilds after the flames of war have scoured the homeworld during the Horus Heresy. Today we'll be continuing this journey, building the monster centerpiece for this cult force, a massive Sasus Knight just infested with Skaven, as well as meeting a bunch of new characters and factions from the campaign as I dive deep into another insane round of conversions.
And yes, once again, we will be cutting up Stormcast Eternals to make them what they were always meant to be.
For the Emperor!
So to kick off this conversion insanity, we have the most important phase of all, resource gathering. I've already got this Sasus Knight box as well as the leftover parts from the Skaven Tide set, so I'm pretty sorted for the rats, but I'm actually going to start with the good guys and build up a bit of an Inquisition force to purge the unclean. Now sadly, GW only sent me the decks, they didn't give me any of the new Inquisition boxes, so we're going to have to get clever and go for a bit of a dive through the bits box.
This campaign is of course set in the decades after the Horus Heresy. So it's a wonderful time period to explore and is ripe with some golden conversion opportunities. We can of course use a bunch of Horus Heresy pieces as well as bits from more modern 40k kits to start representing this period of epochal change. Jason, if you're listening, press pause and skip forward about 30 seconds, and that also goes for anyone else who doesn't want spoilers for the Siege of Terra. After the Horus Heresy, the Imperium went through some massive upheaval and restructuring, particularly in the structure and operation of their military organizations. The Imperium not only shattered the Space Marine legions into chapters to create a dissolution of power more resistant to civil war, but they also created the Inquisition, an extension of Melchador the Sigillite's clandestine operations during the Heresy, who can operate with impunity to root out the alien, the mutant, and the heretic. One of the first jobs of the Inquisition was to help cleanse the ruins of Terra, but being so newly formed, their forces were broad and varied, often requisitioning support from other areas of the new Imperial military structures. The new plastic solar auxilia kits are going to be a huge resource for us. Not only do they nicely resemble elite Imperial army from this period, but they also just have a wealth of bits for conversions. The next big score was an incomplete Ashes of Faith box that my mate Andy sent down to me, which has some great stuff, a bunch of Inquisition themed parts from the Inquisitorial kill team, and even some Sisters of Silence. I've got a wealth of Heresy and 40k Space Marine goodies lying about the workshop as well, so I'm feeling pretty prepared, pretty immersed in the lore. It's time to dig in and get converting. So our way into this hobby journey is going to be the heroes of our campaign, the Inquisitors and their retinue. And I'm going to start with the biggest beast of all, a Lord Inquisitor, who gets unlocked towards the back end of the campaign once the cult uprisings get really serious. And befitting his status, I decided this absolute beast Praetor in Terminator armor from the Horus Heresy range was a great start. I love the idea that this guy is a veteran from the Siege of Terra, and you just don't see Inquisitors in Terminator armor that often. I had to play with some Inquisition-themed details from the Inquisitorial Agent sprue, but nothing was getting me excited to begin this kit bash in earnest, and then I remembered the golden rule of big heroes. massive capes.
No capes.
And what better place to grab a big swishy cape than the Skaven Tide Stormcast Eternals? The Lord Veritant's cloak came in 2 pieces, which allowed me to reposition it nicely as if it was clipped onto the Terminator armor pauldrons, and then I grabbed some green stuff and began to make this cape look like it belonged, extending the fabric up onto the pauldrons and then blending the 2 halves together. I then saw his nice little shield on the Stormcast sprue and decided that my Inquisitor was taking that as well, so I carved back and filled in all of the insignia on the shield surface that really screamed Age of Sigmar, and then added a purity seal and left a nice flat detail for a sweet Inquisition transfer, and then mounted that in place on his back. This guy definitely needs some more details, but we're off to a great start, so I slapped him down behind me on the resources bench and then started knocking out the beginnings of our retinue. The first 2 members were just built straight off the Inquisitorial Agent's Kill Team sprue because I just love the models. The Gun Servitor and the Auto Savant, they have mega old school Inquisitor model vibes. Then I added 1 more model from that box set, but did a little bit of simple kit bashing, mashing a few of the different models together to build a staff-wielding acolyte with some extra Inquisitorial details. But to be honest, a lot of the other poses in this set really don't do it for me. They're way too much of a cultist vibe, so instead I found a couple of ripper sculpts from the Blackstone Fortress model range, the Zealot and the Primaris Psyker, who just scream Inquisitorial retinue. But then it was time for another proper conversion. Up next, I need another Inquisitor who is a bit lower in the ranks, who players can access earlier in the campaign as the cult threats are still brewing, and I just could not go past kit bashing more Stormcast Eternal parts. They're actually such a great fit for Inquisitors because they often have really unique ornate armor, so I did a dry fit of all of the remaining pieces of the Lord Discordant and then started getting very excited. I got rid of the staff arm and then clipped off the ornate backplate and then grabbed a box of Devastator Marines to loot for some more classic power armor parts to transport this Age of Sigmar sculpt into the world of 30k and 40k, and I started with the Sergeant's backpack, that nice power pack which has a little bit of extra Auspex detailing which suits really well. Now that our power armored has its power pack, the left arm with the Wicked Sword is working perfectly for a force weapon with just a simple shoulder pad added, but then the right arm needed a new power armored upgrade from the Devastators, and then a bunch of green stuff to blend the last part of fabric from the cloak that I already stole and get that up and over the shoulder underneath the new Space Marine pauldron. A Storm Bolter to mow down some cultists, and then some details from the Inquisitorial Agent's box to bulk out the back of that cloak and make it look like a kind of custom bit of drapery that flows down and around on the front and back from the right shoulder. So that's a nice start for the heroes of our campaign, but I think we all know where we want to go, right? Let's jump right back to those crazy rat-infested Skaven 40k nutters, the Cult of the Fang, and bring their monster centerpiece to life. So the Sasus Knight is an absolute beast to build, and it could be a monster to convert. So after I did a bunch of rat-infested vehicles in the last video, I'm gonna build this behemoth a little bit smarter so the whole project doesn't take weeks. Our first task is these thick legs. Our main structure here is massive pistons and joints that make the core leg structure. I assembled these nice and simply following the instructions and got a nice dynamic pose striding across our base, and then things get a little more interesting. This big, gorgeous walking war machine is of course looted, salvaged, repaired and reanimated by the Cult of the Fang rat engineers, and we need to show that history, the story of this once noble knight in the conversion. So I'm going to be weathering and adding life and details as we move through the assembly, rather than trying to add that all on top at the end. The first bit of that story starts right here in the legs. The ankles are actuated by these pistons beneath the armor plating, and on each leg I modeled several of them to be blown out and shattered at odd angles, leaving just enough so that there were pistons intact for it to actually function, but this guy has definitely got a limp. I also bent and twisted one of the cables pumping coolant fluid to the pneumatics in one of the legs so that it hung down disconnected between the groin and adds a really nice visual indicator of the damaged state. I left all of the armor plates removed for now and then jumped onto the upper torso, assembling that main structure and gluing it in place onto my legs, and then it was time to look at our first arm. The right arm has a big power gauntlet and then a shield. I left the shield off for now, but assembled all of the fingers on the gauntlet really haphazardly so they were kind of hanging hanging out of their joints at odd angles, like all that's keeping them there is the actuation cabling inside the gauntlet, which gave this big knight a pretty spooky wave.
All of this kit bashing of like 40k models has got me mega excited to actually do some gaming. So I've got a little 40k game here set up behind. You can see my Blood Ravens, and we've got some orcs for a game that I'm playing against Jace later tonight. But some of you might have noticed that the views have kind of been tanking lately, and when the views go, the sponsors go. So there is no sponsor for this video, so instead of a kind of sponsored slot, I wanted to show you guys something really, really cool. These are Battle Box. This is an awesome set of digital files that a mate of mine here in New Zealand has released. Look, he's even printed a sweet little like Zorpazorp logo on the front. Basically, they're like storage organizers they're like the ultimate wargaming accessory. There's, you know, stuff to put all your cards, all your dice, it all kind of locks together, objective markers. There's even these little like trackers for command points and rounds and all your kind of different objectives. These are like movable, you know, so you can score your points. They're so cool. And have a look at these. Have a look. Hang on. I don't want to tip them all out, but he's even made me like some custom Zorpazorp objective markers. I am just absolutely frothing these things. Just to be clear, this is not a paid ad, but Ollie does have a Kickstarter, which is linked below, where you can get all of the awesome files for printing these off, and even the little Zorpazorp lid, so you can have a little Zorpazorp branded battle box for your wargaming. And Ollie, being the absolute Kiwi legend that he is going to send me a little kickback for every pledge that you guys make, so you can support a little Kiwi business and support Zorpazorp at the same time. I love these things. They are so damn cool. Right. Let's get back to converting.
And then, with his head in place, it was time for our armor plating. Now, leaving these all off means, of course, I can weather them before attaching them to the chassis, which makes it really easy to just fill them with bullet impacts and burns and scorch marks and chips, all the sorts of damage we'd expect to see on a knight that is a veteran of the Siege of Terra. I also weathered the top carapace armor and made the little pilot's room, which adds like some nice interior detail inside the knight, which you bloody better believe I'm gonna stuff full of rats. So I grabbed some of the Scaventide sprues and began our ratification, starting with a couple of heroes that I'd saved for just this model, and built this awesome little rat engineer dude with like an eyeglass who nestled perfectly inside the cockpit, popping out of the hatch to have a peek at the enemy. I mean, let's be honest, there is no way that the augers or the auspex are functioning anymore on this knight, so his little eyeglass is probably the best diagnostic tool at his disposal when traversing the battlefield. Then I grabbed the big warp fire cannon from the Scaventide set and assembled the top half of that without the wheeled kind of trolley base, because I thought it would make this awesome like shoulder mounted turret that the Skaven have bolted on to their holy bringer of death. I used a few spare tank parts from a Kratos to add extra bracing and supports to kind of nestle it into the shoulder plate, and then made some dodgy joints out of green stuff to really blend those parts into the armor to make sure it was kind of harmonious with the Cerastus. Then I finally knocked up the left arm with that wicked lance, which just looks so badass, but I'm not sure how to pose it yet, so I just left it unglued, and then I can decide on the pose later down the track.
This has to be one of my most favorite things that I have worked on in a long time. The plastic kit is amazing. The dynamism of the pose that you can get, all the battle damage has been really fun, and of course the ratifications are getting me very excited. Before we lock the position of this second arm, I have a crazy idea I want to explore. This is the kind of energy shield thing. It normally clips on here, but the little rat engineer in me doesn't see a shield, it sees girders and steel beams and bracings for a bunch of platforms to hold even more rats. If you guys are getting crazy inspired by these armies or this board and you're gonna go on a Warhammer shopping spree, make sure you use all of my affiliate links down in the description. I think I've hunted out all of the greatest deals. Like, no matter where you are in the world, there's a link for you down there, and it sends a little kickback towards the channel, which is just amazing. You're gonna buy Warhammer anyway, right? Use my links down below, and then I get a little kickback, you get your Warhammer. I mean, it's a win-win situation.
I've also added a new North American affiliate, the lovely folks over at Gamers Guild, who ship to all 50 states and Canada, so if you don't want to buy from Amazon, they have an incredible range. So it's time for more crazy rat platforms. The shield was the perfect source of struts once I'd mounted it to the back of the knight behind the shoulders, and then added more bracing using the off-cut pieces of shield and some wooden struts to keep kind of blending our steel and wooden salvage aesthetics together, and then just a huge collection of random tank parts, doors and armor plates, all layered over the struts like sheet metal flooring, just kind of glued down as haphazardly as possible. This platform will serve two purposes for our Rat Knight: transport capacity for troops, and of course storage for munitions and salvaged loot. So I just dumped a whole bunch of random Imperial bits on the shelf: backpacks, weapons, jerry cans, everything that the rats need or have collected on their salvage mission. I also knocked up a little loot trolley with the base of that Skaven cannon, like these little rats are kind of running supplies to their knight in the middle of combat, just like that scene from Matrix Revolutions with the mechs. And then I added a final detail, which is of course just a bunch more rats. Now we converted these all up in the last video. I've added in another sniper, various kind of low-level rats, and a priest of the cult inspiring the hordes to advance through the ruins to further the aims of the cult of the Fang. Then I jumped back to our Imperial Palace and reassembled the force built so far, and then gave them all the big news, and I gotta tell you, they were pretty excited to finally meet their beloved Rat Knight. What an amazing centerpiece for this force. I think I can comfortably say that the rat cult is looking great. All of these guys just need a coat of paint and they're pretty much done, but there are still two other cults to put together for this campaign, and of course, we need more than just a couple of Inquisitors for our Imperial force.
A little bit of an apology to all of my Patreons in the Discord who have just been getting massacred by work in progress photos. I've been getting pretty hyped up by converting all the crazy conversions in this video, particularly the Sasus Knight. So you guys just got a hell of a lot of spam, which was really helpful to G me up and push through this massive week of conversions. So a huge thank you to everyone in the Patreon Discord and my Patreons and channel members and super chatters more broadly. My views have just absolutely been going down again the last couple of months, so the YouTube ad rev is in its boots, and the lifeblood of this channel is my Patreons and my channel members and everyone who super chats in the comments. So thank you so much to all of you incredible folks. If you'd like to support all of this madness and see more just, hobby insanity, go and check out my Patreon. It's linked down below. It would mean the world to keeping this channel alive.
Now, obviously, I want to add solar auxilia models to the good guys as well. They tie really nicely to the time period, and we've already got some of them in the Cult of the Fang, so it feels like a really good fit. But in our campaign, the Inquisitorial forces are deploying all over the ruins of Terra, doing small missions as they hunt down these cult forces, and they're going to draw on whichever Imperial garrison is nearby, so I don't want all the Imperial army to look exactly the same. And then I got struck by an absolute light bulb of an idea. Longtime viewers will be well familiar with my love affair with Vostrians. This began all the way back in 2004 with a crazy campaign called the Tandaris Outbreak, exclusive to White Dwarf Australia. Yes, it used to be a regional magazine back then, and when we filmed the Mark of Kelth Horus Heresy campaign in 2022, I began to build my Vostrians to represent the Imperial army allied to the Ultramarines. The cold weather gear and the heavily ornate finery styling their armor is even more appropriate for an Imperial army unit in the Imperial Palace. Now, the bulk of my Vostrians are actually still in Australia, but I've got just a sprinkling here in New Zealand, which can join our Inquisitorial forces. Back in 22, I decided to convert up some special units, starting off with the Command Squad, led by a grisly veteran of the Siege of Terra who has seized his chance to unleash retribution in the name of the Emperor and cobbled together the remnant of his Imperial army regiment in the aftermath of the heresy. For him, I have the incredible Vostrian General model, which was sent to me by a longtime fan of the channel, Joe from Legionnaire Minis, who is basically the king of Vostrians on Instagram. Now, he is perfect, but his Command Squad needs some flair, so I decided to make a big custom company standard, stealing a banner from one of those plastic Primaris bannerman models. I decided that the perfect Vostrian standard bearer model would be one of the snipers that I had spec spare, as without his arms, the swirling cloak already has a lot of presence on the table. I kit bashed the banner in place with some arms from the Forge World Renegades and Heretics sprue, and bam, that is one sexy Imperial Army bannerman ready to stand atop the ruins of Terra. The Imperial Army needs to ride to battle in style and have some seriously armored support, so I opted for 2 Malcadors to escort the command squad's Chimera, which all tie in really well to the Solar Auxilia and our time period. I'd already built the Chimera years ago, and the 2 Malcadors I picked up secondhand. One was in great nick with magnetized weapons and barrels, but the other was really rough. I cleaned it up and pried open the turret housing so that I can get that turret panning around for cinematic shots in the battle report, and once that turret was salvaged, I realized the roof housing was kind of warped, so I straightened that out with hot water dipping and then magnetized that. And then I grabbed one of the las cannon spotters from the heavy weapons team and committed the ultimate sacrilege, hacking apart out of production rare metal models so he could poke out the top of the hatch like a little tank commander. And there we have the command cadre of the Imperial Army Regiment. Back in 2022, Joe from Legionnaire Minis did this stunning paint job on these 3 units, and I think I'm going to hire him to paint all of the rest of these Inquisition Garrison Army forces to tie that all together. He's just a phenomenal painter. If you're looking for a stunning commission artist, I've got his Insta link down below. He is a legend. Then I deployed my Vostrians and the Inquisition forces I've made so far to the ruins of the Imperial Palace to face off against the Cult of the Fang. There is a lot I still have to get ready before my mate Jason and I can start playing this campaign. Another 2 cult factions, heaps of good guys, and the Imperial Palace board needs to double in size, but we are getting closer. Would you guys like to see more of this project, or are you sick of it? Let me know down in the comments, and I will see you in the next one.